Welcome to the teeming tide pool of cinema that is the Guardian Film Show. Inside you will find presidents and paupers, circus clowns and iguanas, the English and the French. So come live with us inside our little studio home. You'll never want to leave.
Oh, this is France, Charlie. Look at it.
Within four walls on this week's show, Gemma Arterton finds herself married alive in rural northern France as Gemma Bovery. A tin pot dictator is knocked on his can in Mohsen Makhmalbaf's The President. And, missing believed lost, the great Alejandro Jodorowsky returns to his Chilean hometown for a dance of reality.
Nunca realidad.
First up, the Wolfpack, Crystal Mossel's acclaimed documentary about a family of modern-day hermits living 16 stories above the streets of Manhattan. Knock on the door, and they may let you in.
We had this idea of like having a big group, like our own community, our own race here. We were frightened kids. My father kind of overdid it.
Meet the Angulos, timid mum, brutish dad, 7 kids. They've lived all their lives in this cramped little apartment. They can't go out because dad's got the key, and so the world comes to them in the form of gangster movies and TV shows. Sooner or later, something's got to give.
Batman must take his mask off and turn himself in.
I'm joined, assuming they ever left, by Peter Bradshaw and Henry Barnes. Peter, reviewing this film at Sundance, our colleague Jordan Hoffman likened it to the Mills Brothers' Grey Gardens, and you can see his point, although the milieu is obviously very different.
The film that I have to say I would compare it to is Catfish, because I think, I did enjoy this, but I think we need to restart a bit of a debate about things which are a little bit too good to be true in documentaries. Now, I'm not saying it's fake. Mm-hmm. You know, the filmmaker genuinely has found a family that all live together, and that's true.
Yeah.
But I think the film is pushing hard this idea that they're like they've been brought up by wolves and they literally have no idea, and they're obsessed with movies and they all dress up like movies. Mm. And I felt sometimes that I was watching a movie by Michel Gondry, these extraordinary costumes which they come up with. I mean,
the whole Sweden thing.
Yeah, and also the Batman costume that he makes. I mean, I think if I went out now and went to a fancy dress store or something, I don't think I could make a Batman that looks so good and so kind of comedy amateur as the one he came up with.
I'd so like to see you try.
Well,
After I saw The Dark Knight, that made me believe that something was possible to happen.
Did you find it suspect, Hen?
No, I bought into it wholesale. And why not? I mean, I don't know, there's something about the kids that is so innocent and so naive that I don't think they'd go along with that kind of thing, weirdly.
Well, it's the extent of just how cloistered they've been.
Yeah,
and there's occasionally moments where they say, oh, well, they went out on supervised trips quite a lot. So you think, well, then they're not, it's not like they've lived all their life inside these walls.
I mean, it's not made clear, but then she did meet them at a strange time when they were kind of between the two extremes, right? The dad had started to take them out of the house. She, in fact, met them on their first trip where they were allowed out of the house on their own, or so she says. So she is at a point in the story when it's kind of reached its third act, and we're relying on archive footage that they've shot to show us the story at its real meaty, juicy weirdness.
I wanted a little more context, and I wanted a little more interrogation of the dad, who's the kind of central figure in all of this, who's kind of not let off the hook, but at the same time he's not interrogated in the way that he should be.
Yeah, he's left to basically sit in the room and be drunk a lot, and you have this impression again that in the past he was almost a dictator to the family and had an idea of how this cult that he was building was going to come about. And then the ideals of that all fell apart, and he's become depressed, alcoholic, and just sits in his room because the world isn't how he wanted to create it. But we're never actually told that, so you're left to infer that a lot yourself.
I'll tell you what I think is interesting, is that it's a New York story about post 9/11, is that it's about, oh my God, New York is a dangerous city and the ultimate horror has happened out there. And so from that moment
it's a survivalist story set in the busiest city in the world.
Exactly. And after 9/11, people were cocooning, they were holding up and barricading themselves in a way. And I think that is part of what this is about. And I do think that is interesting.
It felt like another world. I did everything I could to make that world come true.
escape my world.
Visiting with the Wolfpack there. Let's now kick open the doors and head off to the countryside of northern France, the setting for Gemma Bovery, spun out from the graphic novel by Posy Simmonds and starring Gemma Arterton in the title role. It looks like this.
Des cosmos.
Des cosmos.
Cosmos, c'est le nom des fleurs.
Oh, c'est pas mon vocabulaire.
Spare a thought for Gemma Bovery, a Londoner run aground in rural France. Her marriage is becalmed, she hungers for adventure, and she's watched at all times by Fabrice Lucchini's bookish local baker. He thinks she's Flaubert's tragic heroine, born anew. Henry, what a load of old twaddle.
Yeah, what a load of old twaddle. And correct me if I'm wrong, but other than the disappearance of Alice Creed, has Gemma Arterton been good in anything? I think she's charming. I think she's really good. She's a strong performer, but somebody needs to find a way to direct her in something that is got some spice to it or some interest, and she's just floating along through this looking nice, essentially. There was some talk that she was going to be cast in Under the Skin, which would have been incredible, before ScarJo, which would have been great, because that kind of weirdness that she needs in her career right now, after things like Byzantium, which was a massive flop, and then Songs from Mariam, which, God, it was boring, and then this, which is just flat.
And it's utterly inoffensive.
It's totally
inoffensive.
inoffensive.
At the same time, you're thinking, why?
Yeah, and the director, Anne Fontaine, has actually completely missed the point of Posy Simmonds' graphic novels about the Brits, that the inherent ridiculousness of British mannerisms and the class system and the way that we're not able to express ourselves through anything but pent-up feelings that suddenly explode in massive amounts of very strange drama. Like Tamara Drew, Stephen Frears actually managed to show that quite well, that we are preposterous, basically, and we're never honest with ourselves or others, and that's what leads to comedy and drama. And this is just completely null and
well, the
void of
film
all of
is
that.
preposterous here, isn't it?
I think it is preposterous, but I thought it was self-consciously preposterous, and I quite like that. And I do quite like Fabrice Lucchini. He's so camp that I find whenever he comes on, I always feel that he's raised his game, raised the film's game, and I always feel like I want to watch him, even though he's
raised it
floating
right over the top.
Right over the top.
The dough spilled out of the top.
I know, I just love it. It's outrageous. I know, there's some real Albert Square acting. I mean, the acting can be wildly uneven.
It's almost sort of double takes to the camera.
We get some real leching over Gemma's curves, some real leching stuff. But not
just Gemma's curves, when she's kneading the bread dough.
It's outrageous.
I thought he was going to have an orgasm.
Yeah. I mean, it is very sugary, but I do have to say I did find it quite watchable.
Are we meant to care about them?
No, I can't believe it. I mean, the finale.
The finale is astonishing.
It's so outrageous that I just laugh. I can't believe we're supposed to care about it because
and how
it's
much
just
foreshadowing
ridiculous.
do you need of Gemma Arterton sniffing a piece of bread and going,
And you're spoiling this.
Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. I didn't get it. I'm not sure that anybody could have predicted exactly what's supposed to happen because it is
apart maybe
so
from
outrageous.
a 5-year-old. Yeah. If a 5-year-old was writing this, that would be the ending they come up with.
Yes, exactly. The kind of wacky POV shift at the end. In other words, we didn't know what was happening. I know it's absurd, but I have to say I did quite enjoy it.
C'est quoi?
C'est la croquinette, multicéréales. Mais je vous recommande plutôt celui-là. C'est plus doux, c'est à la graine de lin.
Je prends les tous.
Gemma Arterton is Gemma Bovery, whether she likes it or not. And with that, we're off still further afield to small-town Tocopilla on the coast of South America. This is what reality looks like if you're Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Algo nos está soñando. Entrégate a la ilusión. Vive.
Once, long ago, the mighty Alejandro Jodorowsky was just a shy little boy, oppressed by his Stalinist dad, enthralled to his mum, and cavorting through a world of circus clowns, iguanas, and amputees. Now he's heading home to set things right, whipping up a reimagined memoir and dancing himself right off of the map. Peter, I'm not sure we're going to see a more rich, wild, strange film than this.
It really is. I mean, this is organically grown, and it makes a lot of other things look like GM produce, really. It's weird. It's like it's the nearest thing that some people of our generation can have of going back in time and watching a new underground movie made in 1969, because it has that a kind of attitude that you'd never get from anybody now. I mean, he's 86 now, and he's still doing it the same way, although with a new personal tint. The attitude to nudity in the human body, for example, is very interesting. It's kind of very candid, and there's a lot of letting it all hang out, but in a way which would be totally different now from anybody wouldn't show nakedness or sexuality in anything like that way. And there was that scene, the extraordinary scene where you see his dad. He's so furious by what's on the radio, he dumps the radio in the bin, takes his dick out, and then urinates on it. He shows it quite flat. It's really happening, and then bang, the radio blows up, and it's done in this kind of naivety and ingenuous straightforwardness that I don't think anybody would do it like that now.
And it's his
bizarre.
son, Brontes, playing his dad.
Playing
so
his
this
dad.
whole kind of Freudian folds there.
Weird Freudian sort of wheels within wheels are happening here. He's always used his kids in his films, but now there's something very much more Freudian now that they are grown up enough to play his dad. I mean, that's amazing, especially the scene where you see him being tortured by fascists with electrodes attached to his balls. Again, done absolutely, almost like a medical textbook. It's shown straight up, right in front of shot. It's sort of incredible. Not exploitative exactly, but just done with this absolute, almost innocent kind of candor, which is really absolutely unique.
Well, it's that sort of unvarnished therapy session, and yet kind of whisked into this kind of weird burlesque as well.
Weird. It's personal, and yet it's not personal. It's evasive in a way. And why I love this film in a way is that it casts a new light on the whole of the rest of his work in a way. It's saying that, look, a lot of his surrealism and psychedelia has in a way been a flight away from the pain of his childhood. In a way, he's coming quite close to telling us, I loved my dad, he didn't love me, he was humiliated, and this is my attempt to restore to him in an ironized and absurd way some of the dignity and heroism that he felt he deserved. And even now, I'm way older than he was at the time, I feel he deserves it now. And there's something weirdly moving about that.
Yeah. I interviewed him in Cannes for this.
Yeah.
And he's kind of bonkers, but in a way that makes perfect sense as well.
He was slagging off Leo DiCaprio, right?
He was saying he's a prostitute advertising watches. And he talks about psychomagic. And he was saying this is all about psychomagic. And because of psychomagic, he says that even though he's 86 now, he's going to live to 120.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, good luck to him. It's great, this, isn't it? It's like somebody's telling you about a bad dream they had, but it's actually interesting.
Yes.
In that, it's strung to a narrative.
Yeah.
All the surreal elements actually make sense and are linked back to and are used sensibly and have interest in them. And I'm totally with Peter on the pissing. I never thought I'd say that. But but if you think about all the fuss that was made about Michael Fassbender taking a slash in Shame, and he was really doing it. And this film just does it. It's an old-fashioned film in a way. It just does it and gets on with it.
Yeah.
And I think Brontes is brilliant in this. It's a fantastic film. I really loved it. I was totally with all the surreal elements. I felt for him. I felt for the son. And I did wonder if there was perhaps an element of nostalgia in that he's perhaps more loving to his father and his mother than they actually deserve at the end of it all.
Yeah,
but maybe
But that comes with age, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an act of healing, isn't it, this film?
Certainly his mum seems softer and more gentle and more caring than he's painted her to be in interviews I've read with him. Like, she was a lot more abusive, apparently, in real life. In this, she is a warbling, melodramatic, operatic figure, quite literally. But but a great film, really good.
He spent most of his time experimenting with tarot in Paris. That's the amazing thing, is if you follow his Twitter feed, it's all about tarot. He thinks that's great, and that's a very important creative project that he's following is tarot. So, I mean, that's wonderful. His pantheism isn't a pose. He genuinely believes it. There's no nonsense about it being just a meme or a trope or anything like that. It's part of his life. It really is. And that makes him such a one-off.
La oscuridad se lo está tragando todo.
Todo lo que vas a hacer, ya lo eres.
That's Alejandro Jodorowsky's glorious dance of reality. Just time for one final film. It's by Mohsen Makhmalbaf. It's called The President, and it demands your respect.
Dictatorului režimy tak chopenia. Prezidentti aeroportin teritoriidan sahrautti limusinit ilma.
The president's a tyrant, the people are revolting, and yesterday's dictator is now an old man on the run. He's dragging his wide-eyed grandson through a country in crisis as the bounty on his head rises by the day. All that remains is his presidential beard and a stolen guitar. Henry, we're used to Makhmalbaf making these kind of nuanced, soulful human dramas, and this one's got real pace and bite, hasn't it?
It's got pace and bite. Sounds a bit disingenuous, but perhaps not funny enough for me, really. I mean, after seeing something like Larry Charles's The Dictator, which took this kind of thing and made it utterly ridiculous whilst making a social political point at the same time. I think part of the problem with both films, and particularly with this film, is that the dictator is nationless. He's very careful to not tell you where he's from, and therefore it feels almost otherworldly a little bit.
Yes, but it's a sort of fairy tale parable, though,
It is a fairy tale parable, and that's fair enough, but I guess I just wanted it to be a teeny bit braver in that sense. There's some lovely bits in it. The opening scene particularly, where he's showing his grandson how much power he has by switching all the city's lights off and then switching them back on again, is weirdly touching in the same way that Sacha Baron Cohen could make his dictator ridiculous and lovely. You know, and you're not supposed to root for these guys, but you do
it's
all
like the wizard and his apprentice, isn't it? Almost like, I bring you light.
Yeah, and also the absolute blinkered view that most dictators must have, that their absolute power means that they can't see anything. They basically can only see the image that they've created of themselves. So, yeah, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was diverting. I wasn't sure if it was particularly funny or brave enough for me.
I thought it was really good, actually. And it's not really going for belly laughs, is it?
No, I don't think it's trying to be a comedy in such... I thought it worked very well as a parable. As I say, who knew that Mohsen Makhmalbaf was making a kind of action thriller in a way? Because that opening scene where they surround the ZIL limousine, I thought kind of real nail-biter stuff. It was like something Paul Greengrass could have shot. I thought it was incredible. And as I say, I associate Makhmalbaf with very, very kind of static, contemplative movies like Kandahar. If you compare it with Kandahar, which in theory that was to do with the headlines, but that was very much an art movie. Whereas this, I thought it had some real pace to it. And I like the kind of literariness of it. They're almost like something by Mark Twain.
Yeah, it's pure story, isn't it?
Yeah, I must say I found it very atypical of Makhmalbaf. I thought, my goodness, what's happened to Makhmalbaf? This interesting new direction. It's co-written with him and his wife. There doesn't seem to be any new creative element in the team, and yet there is a real new direction here, and I must say I did enjoy it.
ხალხი, ჯარისკაცები. სულ ყველავინ ჩვენ გარშემოა. გასაგებია? გეგე?
მარია მომენატრა თქვენო ბრწყინვალება.
თქვენო ბრწყინვალება აღარ გამიძახოთ.
That's the president rounding off a particularly vibrant week for new releases. So, hallelujah, praise be for that. My thanks too. Praise be to Peter Bradshaw and to Henry Barnes, and praise be to you for watching. We're back next week.